How are you gonna know when you're ready though?
I can tell you. I can see. Hello there. Very good afternoon and welcome to your 1 p.m. update from the People's Progressive Party Civic. I'm your host, Eddy Layne. I'm joined this afternoon by Charles Ramson Jr., attorney at law and candidate of the People's Progressive Party Civic. Of course, Vickram Bharrat will be joining us in just a bit as we, over the next 30 minutes or so, try to bring some clarity, provide you with some information, and give you some updates as to where we are. Clarity with regards to the CCJ ruling, update you on the current status, and of course, where we are as we head to the finality of the March 2nd general and regional elections. Charles, good afternoon and welcome to the program.
Hi, Eddie. How are you? And I want to wish everybody a good afternoon as well.
All right. So the Caribbean Court of Justice yesterday, in a very concise, clear, and pointed ruling, would have basically, throughout the ruling by the Guyana Court of Appeal with regards to that matter brought by a supporter of the APNU-AFC. When one looks at the ruling yesterday, the two major takeaways I would want to say from that ruling are: one, the issue of jurisdiction of the Court of Appeal, in first and foremost hearing the matter, and the second has to do with that attempt to insert a word in the Constitution to give an entire article a totally different meaning, and more so giving the chief elections officer an opportunity to more or less invalidate votes at his own whims and fancy. Charles, starting with the issue of jurisdiction, the court ruled yesterday that the Court of Appeal of Guyana had no jurisdiction to hear the matter that it heard because of the narrow jurisdiction that is given to, I think it's Article 177, if I'm correct there, where the court has the final say in such a matters in the first case. But as an attorney at law, I'll probably give you the opportunity to more or less explain Article 177, the whole issue of jurisdiction with regards to that particular article.
All right. First of all, I want to start off by saying that I've noticed the stark difference in action by Keith Lowenfield as it relates to his action from the Court of Appeal ruling when he had prepared his report a matter of just a couple of hours. You would recall he had prepared that report maybe just 2 hours after the Court of Appeal would have issued their ruling, even though no written ruling was given by the Court of Appeal, and that the order itself in written format didn't come out until the very next day. Notice the difference between that, his action then and his action now, when you would have seen that the CCJ would have made a ruling yesterday afternoon, just around 24 hours ago, and up to now, he has not presented his report, which would be the basis upon which GECOM can declare its results. So that's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is that everyone in Guyana knows so far that the CCJ, as you rightly said, would have set aside or vacated the order from the Court of Appeal. And they also would have invalidated and set aside the report that Lowenfield would have submitted to GECOM, where he attempted to invalidate 115,000 votes, and in the process, giving the APNU-AFC a win. So the matter is now squarely left with GECOM, but in particular, I want to point out to everyone's attention one particular issue coming out of the ruling, which is that the CCJ said that no one or nobody, which includes the Chief Elections Officer or GECOM can invalidate votes other than the High Court after a declaration is made and through an elections petition. That says to me that in no uncertain terms and in very clear language, it means that GECOM is now in a position to declare the result of the election. And in fact, they will have no choice but to declare the People's Progressive Party to be the winners, because the validation of the votes have already been done at the recount. We would have had some 460,000 valid votes, of which the People's Progressive Party got the most votes, which was 233,000 odd votes. The third point I want to make at the outset is that I've seen some criticisms of the CCJ ruling that is coming out of the APNU-AFC camp. And let me say, first of all, that unless you have a law degree, unless you have been called to the bar of Guyana, unless you have been appointed a judge of this and practicing as a judge, and that you have 10 years of experience, you don't have the authority or the knowledge, the technical skills to be able to criticize the judgment of the CCJ. I've seen people like the creature, Aubrey Norton, saying things like this was a political decision. This was not a political decision. It was a strictly legal decision. When the CCJ has, because you've asked me about jurisdiction at the beginning, Eddy, when the CCJ said that despite the finality clause that appears in the Constitution, a superior court always has jurisdiction to review whether an inferior court would have taken the correct jurisdiction on an issue. So just to be clear, all that the CCJ did was to determine whether the Court of Appeal was right to take jurisdiction in making that ruling that they made in the Eslin David case. And what they determined was that the Court of Appeal never had jurisdiction to make that ruling. And they said so in their judgment, not only that they didn't have jurisdiction, but that if it was the case that the applicants in this situation, the appellants, which in this situation is Comrade Jagdeo and Comrade Irfan Ali, if they did not have the ability to rule on that issue, they would have said so, and they would have made that ruling. They said so in the case. So when it is you hear the criticism coming from Aubrey Norton and a number of persons who are connected to the APNU-AFC, unless they can show you their law degree, their admission to the bar license, their appointment as a judge, then they don't have the capacity nor the wherewithal to be able to criticize judges of such high standing at the Caribbean Court of Justice.
And even if we don't meet to the point of them maybe being qualified, one would want to ask Aubrey Norton and co. just point to the law, or where it says the CCJ doesn't have the jurisdiction, and when they're criticizing these judges, for them to present the facts to support their arguments. Vickram, I want to bring you in here, and we're talking about the whole issue of jurisdiction in the first instance, where the CCJ would have ruled that the Court of Appeal had no jurisdiction because of the fact that the article which Ms. David cited in her application deals with the qualification of a president. In my layman's understanding, what they were arguing there, or what they attempted to put on trial, was really the order 60 of 2020, and more so, they were trying to, in through a backdoor kind of way, somehow trying to invalidate votes, which basically um, or only can be done through an elections petition and not in the appeals court, but rather in the high court, which is the proper election court for an election petition. I bring you in here, Vickram.
Thank you, Eddie, and let me say good afternoon to our viewers. Good afternoon, Charles. Let me say from the onset that the ruling by the Caribbean Court of Justice yesterday was a victory for the people of Guyana. It was a victory for democracy because it would have overturned what was an unfair decision made by the Court of Appeal and claiming to have jurisdiction in a case which is clearly not so, because it was clear, and the judgment made by the CCJ was very clear, as mentioned by the president of the Caribbean Court of Justice. The Court of Appeal had no jurisdiction, and to invoke 177.4, as he also mentioned. At some point in time, I believe the judges at the Court of Appeal or the applicant, Ms. David, wanted to tell the world or wanted to change our electoral system to say that there is a different election for president and there is a different election for members of the National Assembly. And that, in my mind, was the road that the judges at the Court of Appeal went down, which is totally wrong, as was corrected by the CCJ yesterday, and was even mentioned in his summary decision by the president, that it is only one election that is held in Guyana to elect the president and members of the National Assembly, and that 177.4 can only invoke by the High Court through an election petition, and that must be done after the declaration has been made. We have seen, as Charles mentioned, a number of criticisms from the APNU-AFC with regards to the CCJ decision. But that is not surprising because we have seen the APNU-AFC criticizing almost everything under the sun and everyone under the sun who has spoken against their act of rigging and undermining the electoral process in Guyana. They went so far to discredit CARICOM, the chairman of CARICOM, the present and past chairman of CARICOM, the ambassadors representing the missions in Guyana, the Organization of American States, the European Union, and these are all organizations, bodies, and countries that have spoken for democracy in Guyana and has ensured that the will of the people is protected so that the correct or the rightful declaration can be made by GECOM. We know that the position now is that it must go back to GECOM and a declaration must be made by GECOM. Charles is right. After the ruling of the Court of Appeal, Mr. Lowenfield prepared a report the following morning, even though there was a 3-day stay of that decision, which means Mr. Lowenfield was not supposed to act on the decision. Yet he went ahead less than 24 hours after the decision and prepared a report which he submitted to the chairman. However, as of this time, no report has been submitted based on the guidance of the Caribbean Court of Justice by Mr. Lowenfield. And the guidance of the Caribbean Court of Justice is clear as daylight. They have set aside that report that was submitted by Mr. Lowenfield, which seeks to invalidate over 115,000 votes. They have set aside that is void, and they have asked that Mr. Lowenfield act on the instructions of the commission in a letter dated the 16th of June. And all of Guyana know that the GECOM chair acting on behalf of the Guyana Elections Commission wrote Mr. Lowenfield to prepare the final report based on the national recount figures. And that is the letter that the president of the Caribbean Court of Justice is referring to. In other words, he's saying that Mr. Lowenfield must prepare his final report based on the national recount figures. We have seen APNU carrying a campaign which is totally untruth, which is misleading the population, which is misleading their supporters, worst of all, saying that the CCJ has set aside the recount process and that we must go back to the 10 declaration made a few days after the election, which includes Mingo's fraudulent declaration. That is totally untrue. And that is not going to lead us down the right path, especially misleading dear supporters. Dear supporters, it is not good for the peace in Guyana. It is not good for a peaceful transition of government in Guyana. So we are calling on all Guyanese to respect the decision of the Caribbean Court of Justice and allow GECOM to make their declaration of the national recount figure, which will show that the People's Progressive Party has won the election by 15,416 votes. And that is what we are expecting from GECOM at this point in time.
Interestingly, you spoke about, both you and Charles spoke about Lowenfield, haste and speed with which he prepared his report after the Court of Appeal decision, not necessarily orders, but just a ruling from the Court of Appeal. And now that he seems to be dilly-dallying with regards to preparing his report, when the court, the CCJ was absolutely clear to say that they would set aside, like you mentioned, Vic, set aside his report that he submitted, and that GECOM must now ensure that Lowenfield used the instructions of June 16th to prepare his report. But, you know, because of the fact that people would have seen the actions of Lowenfield, where he attempted to invalidate 115,000 votes, the fact that he has been wasting a lot of time with regards to preparing a report, and we know today the commission was expected, a meeting of the commission was expected, and we're going to talk about that later as to why the meeting was postponed and so forth. But Article 163, I think B, Charles, of the Constitution has a mechanism through which a declaration can be made, even if Mr. Lowenfield is prepared to present fraudulent or skewed figures or refuse to present a report.
162 1B.
162.
Yeah. Listen, I've never been concerned about Keith Lowenfield because he is merely a statutory officer. And in the terms, if I were to give it similar kind of context to Owen Arthur, he is merely a utensil of GECOM, subject to their instructions and subordinate to their instructions. He's not a member of GECOM. He's merely an employee and a statutory officer. So I don't really lose any kind of sleep whatsoever or have any worries whatsoever with Keith Lowenfield. In fact, what I would like to know, if from the APNU-AFC camp, now that the CCJ has set aside and invalidated the report from Keith Lowenfield, and they went around sharing flyers to the people of this country with Keith Lowenfield's report, now that the CCJ has invalidated his report, will they then now go around to the country in the same format and distribute flyers and say that the report is now invalidated and that we're sorry about this? The chances is that they're not going to do this, Eddy. And I want us to move into this whole why it is that the meeting today was set aside, or it's been postponed, not set aside, it's been postponed until tomorrow. The APNU-AFC camp, they're depressed at the moment, and they haven't recovered from their depression. So they need more time to recover from their depression. So hopefully by tomorrow, they'll be in a position to be able to meet. Because what I can say with all surety now is that there is no possibility of any other maneuver being tried by the APNU-AFC as it relates to legal proceedings. The CCJ has been clear about one particular issue, and one significant particular issue is what I referred to at the beginning, that neither GECOM nor Keith Lowenfield can invalidate votes. The only method to go about doing that after the votes have been counted is through an elections petition after the election results have been declared. So as far as I'm concerned, and my legal position is that GECOM now has no other choice but to declare the results of the election on the basis of what was tabulated at the Artichoke Convention Center, which will see the People's Progressive Party getting about 233,000 votes out of the 460,000 votes.
Thank you very much, Charles. One of the issues, and I think Vickram, you touched on it, the fact that we're in a situation now where the facts are out there, the ruling is available. Matter of fact, shortly after yesterday's hearing, yesterday's decision, the ruling was made available on the CCJ website. But we have a situation now where a meeting was scheduled for today at 1:30 of the Guyana Elections Commission, and based on reports that we've been seeing, is that that meeting has been postponed to tomorrow at a time to be determined, on the basis that the commissioners for the APNU-AFC and the one from the WPA would have requested hard copies and time to study the report. A very clear, concise report that is written in plain language, that anyone could simply read and understand. You don't have to have any legal training. You can basically look at the report, how simple it is and straightforward, the ruling, sorry, and understand it. So we have a situation where another attempt at delaying the process is embarked upon by the APNU-AFC. Vic.
Like you said, Eddy, is another attempt by the APNU-AFC to yet again delay the inevitable. It's to delay the inevitable declaration that the People's Progressive Party have won the election. We have seen so many that Guyanese now have grown accustomed to their delaying tactics and their antics, and doing anything possible, anything and everything possible, just for a few hours or a few days more in government. And then we need to question the motive behind this, because by now it is the writing is on the wall. It is inevitable that the People's Progressive Party will be in government very soon. But what is the rationale or the real reason behind the APNU-AFC using every single means possible, being legal or illegal, to stay in government for a few days more? It is obvious that something is afoot. It is obvious that there's stink of corruption. It's obvious that they're buying a few days more to tie up deals, as the nation have seen what is happening over the last few weeks in land giveaways, the sale of firearm license, and among many other corrupt activities that is happening right now in our country. So that is the only thing that we can think of, them trying to buy time to continue in this corrupt activity. And I just want to reiterate what you would have mentioned so that our viewers are clear as to why the meeting at GECOM today was called off. It must be clear that the APNU-AFC commissioners, they are the ones that wrote to the chairman of GECOM asking for time so that they can read or to study the ruling of the Caribbean Court of Justice. The smallest child in our country, the students that wrote the grade 6 assessment last week, I'm sure they listened to the ruling from President Sanders and they understand it clearly. I'm sure every single Guyanese, except the 3 commissioners, the APNU-AFC commissioners to GECOM, understand the ruling of the Caribbean Court of Justice. But they would have written to the chairman asking for time to study the ruling. Yet another delay tactic. So as a result of that, the meeting has been pushed for tomorrow. And I want to say to our listeners who might not be au fait with the normal procedure at the Guyana Elections Commission, a quorum for the meeting, a normal meeting, a quorum, that is the amount of people that you need for the meeting to be convened and decisions to be legal, you must have at least 2 APNU commissioners, 2 PPP commissioners, and the chairperson. That is for a normal meeting. However, if you don't have a quorum, if you don't have a quorum, the meeting can be called again in 24 hours, and then the quorum becomes 4 persons. That is, any 3 commissioners and the chairperson would form the quorum, and any decision made by those 4 persons will be legal. So that is the normal operating procedure for the Guyana Elections Commission, because a lot of people have been calling into Freedom House asking why the meeting couldn't continue without the APNU commissioners. It couldn't have, because you need two of their commissioners, 2 PPP commissioners, and the GECOM chair. Quickly, Eddie, if I can just comment on a statement made by President Granger yesterday to his supporters at State House. Apparently, they were calling for him to be sworn in, maybe oblivious of the CCJ ruling because they were on the road protesting, regardless of the COVID measures that is put in place by the very government that they're supporting. And the video is circulated in Guyana, and everybody could have heard one of his supporters saying to him, "Tell us what we want to hear, not what you want to see." So it is clear that they understand what is happening in this country, but for some reason or the other, they're being fooled by their leaders, which should not have happened, because I think we have passed that stage a long time now. However, he mentioned to his supporters about fraud, electoral fraud. They had people voting, migration, the normal mantra that they've been singing, and that he has evidence to support this. Well, he should listen to Justice Sanders. He should listen to the president of the CCJ ruling. And it was clear that he said if Harmon or if Lowenfield or if any other individual, including the president, have evidence to support electoral fraud, then they have to wait after the declaration is made and file an election petition at the High Court. That is the procedure to address whatever discrepancies he's still speaking of, because apparently he's disillusional, or he's still in his time capsule. He hasn't recovered from what the loss or the blows that he have gotten after March 2nd, because apparently he was of the belief that he would have ruled for the rest of his life. But he needs to come to grip that the Guyanese people have spoken, and the Guyanese people have rejected him after 5 years in government. As a matter of fact, I would like to say after 4 years in government, because the no confidence motion was passed in 2018. So the Guyanese people have rejected him, and it is time for him to come out and do the honorable thing and to concede defeat so that our country can move forward and people can move forward with their lives.
Quickly before you come in there, Charles, just 2 things quickly, Vickram. And just for clarity's sake, with regards to the quorum, because once the commission is dealing with electoral matters, particularly declaration or consideration of a report of an election, the results of an election, then the time to wait is 24 hours after the first meeting where you don't have a quorum. I think with other matters it is 72 hours, if I'm correct there, Charles. But once it deals with elections,
electoral matters for 24 hours.
Yes, just to bring some clarity there. Also, you mentioned that one of the supporters said, "Tell us what we want to hear, not what you want to say." And then in the same sentence, I heard you say that they're misleading. Based on that statement, I don't think they're misleading their supporters, really. I think the supporters know fully well. But the supporters, those who, the few who are going out and are going around the place protesting and calling for his swearing in, are part and parcel of the gang trying to rig the elections. Because once they're saying to him, "Don't tell us what you want to say, tell us what we want to hear," and then they, in the same breath, they call for his swearing in, it's clear that they too are part of the conspiracy to rig the elections.
And maybe paid to do so too.
Certainly. Charles, I want us to quickly, because we are almost out of time, I want us to address the whole issue. Vickram touched briefly on the deliberate attempts by a small group in the APNU-AFC, the likes of Aubrey Norton, James Bond, Joe Harmon, and Granger himself, trying to to interpret the ruling in their own way, to misinform, to mislead, and to seem to now buy a new narrative that they will want to peddle about the election process in the first instance, and more so the ruling of the court, inclusive of statements emanating from the cabal saying that the ruling essentially invalidated the recount process. So let's go back to the 10 declarations where Mingo would have inserted figures in the Region 4 declaration. And the fact that the president himself said the court didn't issue any coercive orders. They seem to be giving the impression to their supporters and the public that regardless of what, Mingo still somehow, Lowenfield still somehow has the authority to determine valid votes. Sure.
Yeah, I find the entire situation just to be ridiculous, but I'm not surprised because over the last 4 months, all that after they were caught with themselves being involved in this rigging process, all that they've been left with is the ridiculous arguments that are being presented, and in so doing, they're insulting the intelligence of Guyanese people. That's why you're seeing that a lot of people now have just kind of, who were fervently supporting the APNU-AFC, a lot of them have gone silent. A lot of them have gone quiet because they know that they cannot be a part of what they're trying to do, which is to rig on the first hand. But then on the second hand, or on the other hand, they're also trying, they don't want to be associated just with the sheer stupidity that is coming out of the APNU-AFC gang. But it's not only persons that are political here that are doing that. It's also the GECOM commissioners, Vincent Alexander, Charles Corbin, and Desmond Trotman. Those three are also part of the rigging operation. I remember when I was in the Ashman's building, Eddy, when Mingo had just fraudulently declared these results on the step of Ashman's building, while everybody was shouting to tell him, stop, this is not right, this is unlawful. And in the presence of the American ambassador and the British High Commissioner, the Canadian High Commissioner, the European ambassador, and pretty much all the observers. When he was doing that, and for the first time after he had finished, the first time Claudette Singh had come out of her office and come down onto the stairs, but not on the ground floor, on maybe the first or the second floor. Charles Corbin had basically put his hands around her with like a space of maybe about 8 inches or so. And everywhere she went, he was trying to engulf her so that nobody could come near her. It was a totally unreal situation that I witnessed with my own eyes that shows the desperation of their rigging operation. And it was despicable to see that the desperation goes to the level where they would put their integrity and reputation on the line just so that they can have their crew sworn into power. But in the very near future, despite all of their shenanigans that they're going to be trying between now and tomorrow, when the election result is going to be declared, a lot of information is going to come out as it relates to the amount of money that Vincent Alexander would have received through this government and the government programs that they have. Same thing as it relates to Desmond Trotman and Charles Corbin, and even further afield. When I say further afield, persons who are holding positions in institutions that are supposed to be apolitical. A lot of that information is going to be coming out. A lot of the information about the people who are buying fancy cars and where they got their duty-free from, and how it is that they're in possession of illegal duty-frees. How is it that they're in possession of how they were able to acquire assets in such a short space of time when they originally come from very poor circumstances, personal circumstances, or when they were renting their home, and now they're very rich. So a lot of that is going to come out in the very near future, and that's the reason why, as Vickram says, why it is that they're holding on for dear life. The delay of or the postponement of the GECOM meeting today is really what Claudette Singh is trying to do is to be reasonable with the commissioners, because they're saying for a reasonable reason, we would like to read this judgment, even though they had all of yesterday to do it, they had all of this morning to do it. But really and truly, they're trying also to buy time to come up with another scheme. No other scheme exists. Okay, no other scheme exists now for them to be able to avoid the declaration from happening tomorrow. The People's Progressive Party will be sworn in, will be declared to be the winners by GECOM, and Irfan Ali will be sworn in to be the president of this country. And I'm very certain about that position, and it's very likely that it's going to happen tomorrow.
Thanks, Charles. But we have to consider the fact that, maybe tomorrow you won't see those commissioners present at GECOM, and then
whether they're present or not, right? Whether they're present or not, as Vickram alluded to and you alluded to a moment ago, that the Constitution creates the provision for a declaration to be made in their absence, and just as in a situation where they had signed all of the statements of recounts, but they refused to sign the 9 out of the 10 regional declarations, it doesn't invalidate those certificates of declarations, those regional declarations, right? Their refusal to sign doesn't make something illegal. So even if they don't turn up, the show is going to go on with or without them. The country is going to move on with or without them. Whether Granger concedes or not, it makes no difference to the process whatsoever. It would be easier in terms of people seeing that he's an honorable man. So far, we've seen him behave in a very dishonorable way. But him saying to the press the other day that it doesn't matter, that he can't concede because GECOM didn't make a declaration, it says to me that he doesn't know what the word concede means. Because if you have to wait until a declaration happens, then there's no need for you to concede. Conceding means is that I've seen enough or experienced enough that I don't need to wait until the referee tells me that I've lost. Okay? That's what concede means. I don't have to wait until the referee tells me that I've lost the contest. GECOM is going to declare the results based on the valid votes. And the valid votes, which no one, the CCJ says, no one can invalidate other than the High Court, after the declaration has been made through an elections petition, no one can invalidate that vote. It means that there are 460,000 valid votes, of which the People's Progressive Party got 333,000 valid votes. And we won by 15,416 votes. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, that's correct.
All right. Vic, Charles, I want to thank both of you for joining me this afternoon. Before we go, I just want to quickly, Charles, you made a point of the chair of GECOM, Justice Singh, being reasonable, with allowing the government commissioners or the APNU-AFC, WPA commissioners the opportunity reasonably to read the judgment and so forth. And I want to caution persons that such an act is natural. Someone says they have to consider a document, they need time to read it or so. So, a lot of people are going overboard, trying to attack the GECOM chair and so on, maybe not fully understanding how such an organization should operate and so forth. But I believe, and I think most of Guyana believe, that Justice Singh is prepared to do the right thing, that is to declare the votes based on the tabulated results. So, as we say in our Guyanese parlance, a long time done, short time left. Be a bit patient, maybe the next few days or so, and we believe that all of this will come to an end, and the end of this will only result in Dr. Finale being declared the president and the PPC forming the next government. So, Charles, Vickram, both of you, I want to say thanks for being part of the program, and to our viewers, we want to say
thank you, Eddy.
Thanks.
Thank you.